Let's watch some outright hilarious clips of MAGA clown Vivek Ramaswamy sounding off on bureaucrats, which is something he's known to do, so not that surprising. However, he's doing so despite him now being a bureaucrat himself, seemingly having no problem with it if it's him that's getting the benefit, something we already know from him, taking affirmative action scholarships and then sounding off against them in his presidential campaign, if you want to call it that, joke of a presidential campaign. But let's roll these clips and see what he has to say on the bureaucrat front.
He's talking about $2 billion in cuts by identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. Is that a realistic number? That's a big number.
Yeah, $2 billion isn't a big number, but $2 trillion is, Sean, and that's what we're looking at here. Look,
$2 trillion. I stand corrected.
No, I want to be very clear about the scale. I want to be very clear about the scale that we're thinking here. We're not thinking small. We're playing big here because we have a once-in-a-generation mandate right now. The American people have voted for drastic reform of the government, and our federal government is broken. It's no secret that it is a fourth branch of government, the administrative state that makes most of the rules, that creates a federal bureaucracy that's hampering our economy. So what do we want to do? We want to go in and slash and burn that bureaucracy to help Americans, stimulate the economy, and to restore self-governance again, Sean.
I again reject the premise of this idea or argument that this election was this major mandate on Republicans' ideas across the board to just do all these different things, because as the votes come in, the popular vote was only like a 2% difference, and Trump is now coming down to under 50% of the vote, where again, most people voted off economic vibes, same as in 2020, and we also know, again, most Trump voters believed objectively false things, so the idea that this was a mandate for each specific goal they want is silly. It's more so shows it's a mandate on the effectiveness of their misinformation machine, but it's also silly that Trump is saying he wants to destroy government departments and agencies. He wants to pull back from the bureaucratic power and the government spending on bureaucrats and by bureaucrats. So to do so, he opens another government agency that will need additional government spending to fund and adds in more bureaucrats and bureaucratic power into the government. Vivek, in this clip, is trying to sound off against how the government has non-elected officials in control of the power and money in government as one of those non-elected officials, not even going to be confirmed in Senate unelected officials. Like, the smoke and mirror that MAGA gets to get away with is hilarious and disgusting at the same time. They are doing the deep state shadow government thing while selling it to their base as an attack on the deep state shadow government thing. It's kind of wild.
The people we elect to run the government, they're not even the ones who run the government anymore. It's these unelected bureaucrats. Republican politicians have talked about fixing this for a long time, not with a lot of progress. So I do think it's going to take a couple of outsiders. Elon and I have built a great friendship over the last year. We're working together intensely, and we're not going to stop till we get the job done.
Yeah, a couple real outsiders, as in billionaire business owners, stock investors. I would say the lack of self-awareness is astonishing if what they were selling wasn't being sold to the most gullible crowd of people in America and MAGA who just eat this kind of stuff up and will actually try to push that these people are relatable and actually worried about the working class. Like, to be completely clear and transparent here, this is two billionaire tech bro business investors who are now in charge of hundreds of billions of dollars of government spending where they can cut what they please. So, and I want you to really think about how this is going to look in application. They can cut agencies that administer regulations that are preventing their profit line from growing. Like, who needs these environmental regulations? Let's let workers work around hazardous materials. Who needs these worker protections? We should be able to pay 12-year-olds $5 an hour to work for us. Or they could cut spending on things that the government buys and then just jump in and sell it to the government themselves through their own company or companies they invest in the private sector, probably for a markup in price at that, all in the name of profit. Like, these are the faceless elites that you're warned about when people talk about the establishment or the deep state. MAGA, who ostensibly wants to rally against the elites, the suits and ties in the government that are only concerned for themselves. This is literally them, right? This is them right here doing it in open and in the public. And for some reason, MAGA, who is anti-establishment wants to further prop them up and defend this. This is why I constantly find myself, because for a minute I would get stuck in this argument where it's like the far right is like anti-establishment and then the far left is too, and maybe in some places they have similarities. And what I've realized is they do, right? And in the similarities of the fringe far left and now the far right that is ever so more just becoming the normal right is that neither of them knows what the establishment is. They really just have like these anti-American, schizo-paranoid kind of like tendencies or outlooks about things in America. And that's where most of this materializes from, right? Because now when I talk to MAGA, I find myself having to ask them or ask myself, like, what do you think the establishment is? Like, can you explain to me what the establishment is? Because it's crazy, again, that these people brand their entire political ideology on being anti-establishment when so many of them don't even know what the establishment is. It's just the parts of the government that Trump tells you to hate. Like for MAGA, it's the Democrats pretty much are the establishment, right? Because when you have two billionaires who were unelected, spent millions to help swing the election one way or the other, and are now being rewarded for the money they spent to influence the election by being appointed to a commission that doesn't actually exist without having to be elected for it. They don't have to be confirmed by Senate members who were elected. They're just being told, go ahead, right? Again, to a branch of government that isn't even real, to where they now control hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money without the consent or the vote or approval from any taxpayers, and doing so beyond the checks and balances that currently exist in our government. This is literally what the establishment is. Like, hey, sound the alarm. Sound the alarm for all these anti-establishment guys. This is the establishment. This is the deep state. This is shadow governments operating. They're doing it in front of our eyes. But because they're pro-Trump, because they wear red and saying MAGA and all this, MAGA, no one on the right will ever consider them to be such. Because again, to them, the establishment is like Democrats, right? Instead, to them, the establishment is like the Department of Education. It's not the donor lobby. It's not billionaires influencing politics. It's not unelected officials controlling taxpayer dollars. No, it's things like the Department of Education or Human and Health Services. Like, what are we doing here? When did we legitimize the opinions of so many people? And I think for a long time, because like even a lot of like liberal center left people are like establishment figures. You have like the establishment left and then you have the establishment right. And I think for the longest time when the establishment was in control, the way you wrote off people were by saying they're anti-establishment, right? Oh, well, they're anti-establishment. Liberals did it to the left, and then like hardline, like Romney type conservatives did it to the far right. So now as like being anti-establishment comes more in the mainstream in terms of like voting blocks, at least people are voting against the establishment. They're like saying, oh, they're writing off. They're like, okay, well, the right, you know, we've been told that, you know, this far right fringe is anti-establishment. So they're like legitimized in that way that was actually meant to delegitimize them, when in fact, they're literally not anti-establishment. Like a lot of the far right just want to anoint a king, and they just want to go against all these like core American values. That's not anti-establishment, that's anti-American. Like they just want a monarchy in America, that's it. And then I mean on the left, a lot of this exists too. And like if you go to like the far left, a lot of them don't really know what the establishment is either, right? I mean, but they have more of a sense of it because they'll be like, well, like capital interest is the establishment. Like, yeah, you're a lot fucking closer with that opinion than with the opinion that like the Department of Education is the deep state. Like this, like, it's just oosh fraba, am I right?